In terms of like the importance of free flow of information in democracy, I mean, again, there's perhaps a simple idea that the more the merrier. But what is the proper role of open information in a democratic society? How much do we need? Is it possible to have too much? And I suppose the other question is that are we getting too fixated here with the amount of information, rather than, let's say, quality of information, the understanding of the information? I mean, aren't these all different things? And isn't the danger of this completely transparent society is that a whole load of data just gets dumped, files get dumped, and as perhaps Douglas was suggesting, what happens then is people see whatever is in the pile that confirms their own view and latch onto that. It doesn't actually help us to make decisions.
Well, as long as nobody quotes me on it, can I just say I agree with Annie on this, which is it can't be stopped, but it can be directed in a way. I think that most people underestimate the value of the internet in the long term and overestimate it in the short term. The way in which it's going to change the way in which people read, apart from anything else, is far greater than anyone actually suspects at the moment, and the way in which people access information is going to be far greater in the way it changes people's ideas than anyone expected. So this genie is out. But I just say this, that there are certain things that, even as information becomes more and more available, should remain a source of suspicion, and just in the same way as somebody who dumped thousands of pages of information during the Cold War at the door of the USSR's offices in London, just as people were suspicious of people in Britain who had access to information which they leaked to people who were damaging the national security of this country, just as they were suspicious of that then, they should be suspicious, at the very least, of people who use their position now to damage the national security of the country and the people which they live among.
I just want to make a quick point. You're obviously referring to the Baggini case in the 1980s. This was an intelligence officer in MI5 who was notoriously convicted as a traitor for dumping this information. But the backstory, which is in the public domain, was that this man was handling agents in Northern Ireland and was caught in a safe house with his agent by the IRA. And he hid in the attic, and the agent was tortured below him. And he heard everything about it. And he knew that if the agent broke when the drills were going through his kneecaps, that he would be the next in line for that sort of treatment. And what happened was Baggini had no care, no aftercare, no pastoral care, and had a breakdown because of that, and that's why he went and lobbed the files into the Soviet embassy. So I think, again, the powers that be always make a great fuss about protecting agent lives. You can't whistleblow, you can't information dump. What about the agents? But they have a terrible track record in actually protecting both their officers and their agents in that sort of situation. I mean, we saw the Mark Kennedy scandal recently, the undercover cop, who again went rogue because he wasn't supported. We have a whole string of IRA agents who are looking for justice from the government, like Kevin Fulton, Martin McGartland, and of course there was the hapless Dennis Donaldson, who was the IRA chief of staff at one point, chief of administration in Stormont, Sinn Féin, sorry. And he was outed by Jerry Adams, he was not protected by his erstwhile handlers, and he was shot in the head. So who actually causes more harm to agents? Well, not necessarily the whistleblowers.
Very briefly, Douglas.
But Annie, I mean, in all of these cases, all which I'm familiar with, in the case of Northern Ireland, yes, there are and have been at some points terrible mistakes in the care that security services have taken in regard to the agents. I think it's very disputable in the case of Martin McGartland and Fulton. But look, I mean, the idea that in any way that would excuse somebody then risking the lives of, indeed the very existence of the society in which they live, is ridiculous. As I say, people should retain the ability to make a judgment that people who release information which puts the lives of our soldiers at risk, which puts the lives of civilians in this country at risk, and deeply damages our national security and our international relations, are not people which we should applaud now, any more than we would have applauded them 20 years ago or 100 years ago.
Okay, it's funny, sorry, one final point, I do have to say this. It's funny because the former head of MI5, Eliza Manningham Buller, in her official advice to the Prime Minister at the time, Tony Blair, said that if we were to invade Iraq, we would actually increase the threat to national security. And yet he went ahead and ignored that expert advice. So.
All right, last quote, let's stop there for a sec.